Welcome back to E-Pathshala, EPG program in Japanese. We are into paper 5, Communication through Translation, Honyaku Tsujite no Communication, and today we'll be covering module 15. All these modules we have done so far have covered a lot of theory and concepts also. This is going to be the last module in the series where we'll be talking about some combination of concepts and techniques. This time again I have one of my trainees, Rajat Manjul, as helping me in this particular module for data collection as well as the base work. Let's go for the recapitulations from the previous module. There are many learnings. In fact, frankly speaking, not so many learnings, but it's quite detailed here. Let me read out all these for you. Frame capture and transfer technique is mechanical and can be implemented successfully even if one does not have adequate subject knowledge. The important point here is that when you try to do translation, you'll find that all areas are not so familiar to you. Sometimes the areas are totally unknown to you. Therefore, the frame capture and transfer technique can be very helpful. Proper frame capturing and transfer is significant as different frame renders different nuances. Topic segregation, if at all it has to be done, and identification of final verb as well as linked elements at the initial stage help in applying these techniques. Frame capture and transfer techniques help in ensuring the accuracy in translation, though the readability aspect may require some finishing work or finishing touch. It shows that topic is applicable to all macro as well as micro frames. Micro frames undergo inter and intra transpositioning to suit the target language. Fine-tuning and additions at the end should be minimal. It should be pragmatic and without overindulgence. This technique ensures accuracy and combination with other techniques such as 5W1H, which may help in improving the readability. Let's see 5W1H and frame capture transfer comparison. This is the table coming from the previous module, and if you see here, there are 3 sentences. There is an approach called 5W1H applied here, and there is an approach called frame capture and transfer applied here, and these are the 2 translations rendered here. We need to do a very pragmatic study of comparison, but when these 2 translations were shown to the budding translators, some comments which came out are listed here in a slightly modified manner or in an easy to understand manner, and these are the accuracy ensured in both the techniques. That means accuracy need not be worried too much whether you apply 5W1H or frame capture transfer. Though our comments were the accuracy frame capture transfer is almost same as in the case of 5W1H, but it could be slightly better in the case of 5W1H because this is a slightly logical technique or more logical technique as compared to frame capture and transfer. The readability can be improved further in both these cases. Applying 5W1H seems a tedious task. This is the comment coming from the budding translator. This is true because if you are not very familiar with the content, you are finding the complete thing as Greek, the application of 5W1H might be quite difficult. Then applying the frame transfer, it seems to simplify the translation task. And parameters, the comment was that how do I compare, on what parameters do I compare the 5W1H and the frame capture transfer? Yes, that's correct. So parameters can be applied for judging the accuracy and readability for better or more accurate comparison. And the comments which we had seen in the previous modules, or from the summary of the previous modules, is the accuracy is slightly better in the case of 5W1H or could be slightly better in the case of 5W1H. Readability, frame capture transfer has got lower in ranking as compared to 5W1H, whereas the ease of doing is much more in the case of frame capture transfer when we compare it with the 5W1H. We'll be covering in this module, again it's a continuity, so the approach used is analytical approach and the scientific approach. Analytical to comprehend and practice the translation as an academic endeavor. Scientific approach is organizing the the learning of so far and applying it appropriately. What is covered in this module is basically the translation techniques which are 5W1H and frame capture put together, frame capture as well as transfer put together, and there's a combination of 5W1H, frame transfer and unit. The objectives remain same as before: the professional pursuit, systematical and logical, because 5W1H is applied here. It's a combo approach to comprehend the content. It eases the pressure further on the practitioner by when one uses the unit and the unit equivalents. Rendering accurate translation with good readability, and the outcome expected is same as we have done in the previous modules. The practicing scholars of translation will be able to render value-added translation, generating realistic theories through practice and trainer's trainer. Let's see the outline representation of the translation techniques. We have seen this chart earlier also. There are three techniques we have talked so far: back or the reverse technique, frame capture and transfer technique, 5W and 1H technique. Then there are combination. First combination is frame plus 5W1H, and the second is adding unit concept to it. In this particular module, we'll be covering the last two, that is the frame plus 5W1H and 5W1H plus frame transfer plus unit. Let's start with 5W1H plus frame capture transfer technique. Let's try a few combinations because everything may not be possible to cover here. So few combinations would be two sequences first. These are applied on different sentences. First we will put frame, and then it will be followed by putting 5W1H on the same sentence, and then it will be reversed. That is, 5W1H will be applied first, and this will be followed by the application of frame transfer. And then the third is the mix use. Mix use means a frame next 5W1H, once again frame, and the reverse order: 5W1H, then frame, and then 5W1H. So let's go step by step. First is 5W1H plus frame capture and transfer technique. This is just to remind you. The frame capture transfer, the example used here is Aisiwa Gokinno Naibu Kozoni Ebinde Tasoka Shori Nadono Sosani Yote Toksega O Habani Kojosuru. We have already seen that in this particular case, the macro frame is Aisiwa Toksega O Habani Kojosuru, and out of this O Habani is adverb, so it is taken out. So the frame, macro frame, comes as Aisiwa Toksega Kojosuru, and if we see the pattern which is used in this particular frame, it is very clear: Vaga Suru. If we see this further, the equivalent, it is coming as regards IC, the characteristics improve. You can also say the characteristics of IC improve, but literally transferring the frame, it will mean as regards IC, characteristics improve. Now apply 5W1H on the same sentence. The technique here is, as we have talked earlier also, the technique is look at the verb, what happens. So dosuru, in this case, if you see, first is Aisiwa Toksega Kojosuru. So dosuru Kojosuru improves. Naniga Toksega Kojosuru. So naniga Kojosuru, the reply is Toksega Kojosuru. So what we are doing is actually, by putting questions, we are clarifying the content to ourselves. Nani ni taishite, IC ni taishite. So Aisiwa, because it's a subject here, so Aisiwa is IC ni taishite. Dono yoni o habani doyatte sosa ni yotte. Dono yona sosa tasoka shori na dono. Sonota means, is there something else? It is ebinde, this. Then dare or naniga mataba nani ni taishite. Again it is Aisiwa. Nani ni, nan ni, so naibu kozo ni. Nan no is gokin no. So this way we put a number of questions, and all the segments or all the elements in the original sentence are covered, as you can see here. Now if we see carefully here that Aisiwa is coming two times, that means because in Japanese the repetition is not required. So Aisiwa, if it occurs once, it has to be taken out. The frame capture transfer to 5W1H, if we see here now, it's as regards IC, characteristics improve. And if we see it step by step, as regards IC, characteristics improve. As regards IC, it is sensitive. As regards IC, it is sensitive to internal structure. as regards IC, it is sensitive to internal structure of alloy through operations such as multi-phase processing. So as regards IC, the characteristics improves is one part, and what is happening is IC is sensitive to internal structure of alloy through operations such as multi-phase processing. So if you see carefully, we are able to understand the frame. If we are able to understand the frame in Japanese, we'll be able to form the frame in English also. So now, joining all answers, keeping in mind the 5W1H applied on macro frame as well as the order in SL, this is what done here, and the topic is applicable throughout the sentence, as you can see. Then few more: considerably, improves considerably, and if we put all these together, the sentence comes as regards IC. I'm not saying it can come here, but we are just joining the components. Is sensitive to internal structure of alloy through operations such as multi-phase processing. Characteristics improves considerably. Now this is the the basic components put together. Now it needs to be framed properly, and some degree of fine-tuning can help in doing so. So IC is sensitive to internal structure of alloy, and through operations such as multi-phase processing, its characteristics improve considerably. So what we have done here is that through the frame we have understood the frames, then we have put 5W1H, and when you have understood what's happening, when it is happening, to what it is happening, in what manner it is happening, then you can reproduce the frame in English as per the target language requirement. In the previous slide also, it's mentioned that ease of doing still remains an issue. You have got to go through such a big process of frame capturing, frame transfer, putting questions to ascertain whether your frame capturing and frame transfer is going to be correct. So the ease of doing is not so good so far. Let's see another example where we are starting with 5W1H, applying this technique first, and then moving on to the frame. The example is Jurai, tetrahydrofuran, to ammonia. These are the two chemical compounds or chemicals. To o shokubai no sonzai ka kiso de hanno sasete pyrogen o seizo suru hoho ga tsugi no yoni shushu teian sareteru. If you see carefully, then it's hoho ga tsugi no yoni teian sareteru is very clearly the main frame. Rest is adjectival clause, and this can be kept aside for some time till we are clear with the macro frame. Let's see the main segment and try to pull out the macro frame out of it. We are trying to apply now 5W1H on the without talking about the macro frame. The main frame we have, you can call it, we are trying to identify the macro frame from the main part by keeping aside the adjectival clause. So what has been done is that the complete sentence has been broken into two segments. One is the adjectival part and the other is the main structure or main segment. Out of this, we'll pull out macro frame by applying questions. Do sareteru, teian sareteru. This is the verb. Nani ga teian sareteru, so ho ga teian sareteru. And in this case, if you ask nani ni taishite, it's not there. And we find ho ga teian sareteru is the macro frame, and if we try to see its equivalent, it comes as method is proposed. Now go further, apply 5W1H on the adjectival clause to identify the micro frames or maybe other components. Nani o suru, if you see carefully, just before the ho, it is seizo suru ho. So nani o suru, seizo suru, that's a verb. Nani o seizo suru. So nani o seizo suru is pyrogen o seizo suru. Nani, dare ga, ho ga pyrogen o seizo suru. Or if you put it seizo suru, pyrogen o seizo suru ho ga. That's the order in the original sentence. And nani ni taishite topic is not there because the topic is actually not coming up to here in this particular sentence. Pyrogen o seizo suru is the micro frame 1 and the equivalent is manufacture pyrogen. Now applying further questions on the adjectival clause to identify the micro frames. Nani o sasete, so it's hanno sasete because the sasete is coming, So from there we can say if something is sasete, then nani o sasete, hanno sasete, nani o hanno sasete. Nani o hanno sasete is something and something. This is, in this case it was slightly difficult word, tetrohydrofuran to ammonia. So we change it, substitute it with A and B. A to B to O, hanno sasete. Nani darega is not there, nani taishte is not there. So topic and subject remains blank. So elements not influencing the frame are kept aside for the time being, and complex or difficult elements, the tetrohydrofuran and ammonia, are replaced with something. If you want, you can abbreviate it, you can put some familiar words. Otherwise, things like A, B, X, Y, etc. can also be used for replacing. And the microframe comes out, A to B o hanno sasete, and the equivalent will be A and B are made to react. Now if we try to put back the words, it will look complicated, but doing is not so difficult. It will be tetrahydrofuran and ammonia are made to react. So it sounds heavy, but if you say A and B are made to react, it doesn't sound so heavy. So choice is yours. If you feel substituting with A and B helps, then better use it. The remaining 5W1H question is donna joken de, and there is one condition here, shokubai no sonzai ka kisode, and the target equivalent for this particular condition is in the presence of catalyst in gaseous phase. Now let's sum up the micro and macro frame. The macro frame is ho hoga teyan sareteru, equivalent is method is proposed. Micro frames were A to B o hanno sasete, A and B are made to react. Then perorigin o seizosuru, manufacture pyrrolidine, and the remaining part, that is the condition, was shokubai no sonzai ka kisode, in presence of catalyst in gaseous phase. Now lining up all these frames in the target language, method is proposed, A and B are made to react in C in presence of catalyst in gaseous phase, manufacture pyrrolidine. Now this needs to be connected. Method is proposed, A and B are made to react in the or in presence of catalyst in gaseous phase, manufacture pyrrolidine. This is the outcome of output of the previous slide, or from the previous slide. And if we place back the elements that were taken out, then it is various methods or various method. Actually it's coming is here, needs some modification. Various method is proposed so far as follows: tetrohydrofuran and ammonia are made to react in presence of catalyst in gaseous phase, manufacture pyrrolidine. If we read it out continuously, it is quite confusing, but if we read it out in pieces, it's quite understandable. And since we are understanding it, let's do that fine tuning. Various methods are proposed so far as follows, wherein tetrahydrofuran and ammonia are made to react in the presence of catalyst in gaseous phase to manufacture pyrrolidine. Hope this makes some sense now. This can actually be understood from that 5W1H which we had applied in the beginning. By applying that 5W1H, we have understood, and that understanding remains in your mind, and when you reframe the whole sentence, that understanding helps. We have added wherein to connect the adjectival clause in this particular case. This is one style which can be used. Choice is yours. If you have some other way which is which you are more comfortable at, you can use that method. But this is one way to connect the adjectival clause which is not getting connected directly. Fine tuning, as I said earlier, also has to be pragmatic, minimal, and the meaning or shade not to be given from one's own side, because then this overindulgence can lead to complacency. Macro and micro frames undergo inter and intertranspositioning to suit the needs of the target language, and the ease of doing we have seen has slightly improved here, though readability still needs more improvement. Let's look at an example now where we are going to employ the mixed uses of the techniques. There are two possibilities. The sequence could be two. One is apply frame first, then 5W1H, and then frame again. And it could be the other way around, where we apply 5W1H first, then frame, and then 5W1H once again. Let's see, applying both the techniques will take too much of time here. The first, that is frame 5W1H and frame, was not so helpful in ease of doing. Let's try to apply the second one. The objective is to improve the ease of doing. The example used here is このようなカチオンサイトがナトリウムのアルカリ金属であるフォジャサイト型はこのままでは触媒活性が低いのでイオンを交換することによって活性を向上させることができる。This is an example which we have taken up or done earlier also, so you are now familiar with this example. Let's see how it works. There is an adjectival clause, we take it out. So this first part up to kinzoku de aru goes, and now remaining part, let's apply the 5W1H on this first. Basic aim in this case is to identify the macro frame. It says at the end koto ga dekiru, so the question is nani ga dekiru? Kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. That's the verb. Kojo saseru koto ga dekiru means something has to be done. Something has to be done. It has to apply on something, that is nani o kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. So kasse o kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. That's the object. Then nani ga mata nani ni taishite. So foja sait gata wa, this is the subject. So in this case, ni taishite means it as against this the action is taking place. So foja sait gata wa kasse o kojo saseru koto ga dekiru is the macro frame. And as regards foja site type, activity can be improved is its equivalent in English. So the macro frame is done now. Let's see the adjectival clause to identify basically the micro frames. Let's begin with nani. In this case, natorium de aru, and if something natorium de aru, something has to be natorium. So nani ga, it's kachon sait ga natorium de aru. That is the subject. And nani ni taishite foja sait gata wa. So the topic remains the same here. Kachon sait ga natorium de aru, that's the micro frame, and its equivalent is cation site is sodium. It has been mentioned earlier also that the topic in this particular case foja sait wa will remain common all through, and elements that are not influencing the main frame or the frame are kept aside for the time being. Now for the remaining part, let's apply the 5W1H questions, and the respective answers are as follows. Donna joken de kono mama deva, this was one as it is. Nani ga tokubetsu na gain or ryu ga arunara. Nani ka tokubetsu na gain matawa ryu ga arunara, sore wa nani? So shokubai kasse ga hikui node. This is you can put straight question also. Doshite or donna joken no tam, donna joken ga arimasu ka, sore wa nan desu ka? So it's shokubai kasse ga hikui node. Translation is catalytic activity is low, therefore, or because the catalytic activity is low. Dono yo ni shite ion o koukan suru koto ni yotte, through or by exchange of ions. These questions, as you can see, the question could be one word question, it could be two word question, or it could be a slightly longer question also. The question mechanism or questioning mechanism remains dynamic depending upon what you understand, what you find. You can try to put the questions. Beginning can be made from the verb, and gradually you can go to the object, the subject, then topic and conditions, then maybe when, where, etc. Summing up the summary, what we could gather from 5W1H, the 5W1H and seeking the frame out of there. The topic is foja site gata wa, and equivalent is as regards foja site type. Macro frame is kasse o kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. Equivalent is activity can be improved. Micro frame is kachon site ga natorium de aru, cation site is sodium, and the remaining parts were kono mama deva as it is. Shokubai kasse ga hikui node, catalytic activity is low, therefore, and ion o koukan suru koto ni yotte, through exchange of ions. Now, if we line up all these frames and the elements, it's as regards foja site type, cation site is sodium as it is, catalytic activity is low, therefore, through exchange of ions, activity can be improved. I hope when I was reading, bifurcating the segments, you were able to make out what is being said here, and further connecting it as regards foja site type, cation site is sodium as it is, catalytic activity is low, therefore through exchanging of ions activity can be improved. let's put back the elements that were taken out for temporarily. These are as regards this kind of has been added. This kind of phosphosite type, cation site is sodium alkali metal as it is. Catalytic activity is low, therefore through exchanging of ions activity can be improved. Once you connect and put back the elements, it's getting complicated. This is also an indication that the elements which are making the sentence complicated, they need to be removed right in the beginning only, and they don't make any sense, because suppose I say phosphosite or this kind of phosphosite, it doesn't matter in the case of translation. This kind of can be added at a later stage. And now apply 5W1H for transpositioning. This kind of phosphosite type, wherein cation site is sodium alkali metal, has low catalytic activity as it is, and therefore its activity can be improved through exchange of ions. Though it's not perfect translation, but it's quite reasonably good translation. And here also we have used wherein to connect the adjectival clause. Very clearly we could see that the segregation of topic in the beginning has served very well in the translation for all, it's because it gets applied all through. Macro and micro frames undergo inter and intra transpositioning to suit the target language, which we have been saying all through. In this case we found that readability improved, ease of doing also improved, but it can be improved further. Let's see what happens when we add units to this process. This is the expectation listing here. The process is picking units during the process of 5W1H or during the FT or the frame transfer process. Segmentation into macro and micro frames, and sometimes and sometimes or units, means it could be macro and units only, it could be macro plus micro plus units. The flow we are trying here is 5W1H frame and then 5W1H. That is the one which we have used in the last one, and the expected result is higher accuracy and better readability, and the ease of doing also should improve. Just to recapitulate, the categories with regard to units is universal and quasi-universal. Universal is applicable in any domain and in any context. The equivalence will be universally applicable. In the case of quasi-universal, it is applicable in many domains or contexts, but partly. So only universal part plus one universal part and one more or maybe one or more replaceable parts. The examples given for universal are to onaji yoni, and for quasi-universal teshimo is universal, whereas there will be something which is replaceable, which is coming before that. Now domain specific could be another category for unit. We had discussed this when we had done the unit in previous modules. Let's apply this particular technique on example 3, and if we see, the example remains the same, the previous example, and we are picking up the main frame and trying to identify the macro frame out of this. Nani ga dekiru kojo saseru koto ga dekiru, we have done in the previous one. Nani o kaseo kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. Nani ga matawa nani ni taishite, so phosphosite gata wa. So it's phosphosite gata wa kaseo kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. As regards phosphosite type, activity can be improved. So by applying the 5W1H, we actually got the macro frame and the equivalent to that macro frame, that is the macro frame in the target language also. Let's go for the micro frames. Nani is, we have done this also, natorium de aru, kachion ga natorium de aru, phosphosite gata wa. So it's kachion ga natorium de aru, and equivalent was cation site is sodium. For the remaining part, it's broken into units and then translated. The units are konoyoni, this kind of, and this kind of is a universal, it can be applied anywhere. Konomama deva is also universal, as it is the equivalent. Then shokubai kase ga hikui no de. Ga hikui no de, it's quite debatable, what will be universal and what will be not universal. Somebody can say no de alone is fine, hikui no de is fine, ga hikui no de is fine. Choice is yours, but I would say that something that you find is for example, ga hikui no de is low, therefore, or because it is low. The two possibilities are there. Now is low, therefore is quite commonly replaceable or universally replaceable. So this part becomes universal. Shokubai kase is a noun and its catalytic activity. So this can be anything. Suppose I say Jetsuen se ga hikui no de. So it's quite applicable. There can be something else which can be put before this. Similarly, ion o kokan suru koto ni yotte. So ion o kokan and suru koto ni yotte is very common, universal. Ion o kokan is replaceable. So it's through exchanging of ions. We have deliberately put exchanging here because kokan suru is verb. Otherwise, it can be also through exchange of ions. This is quasi-universal. And now summing up the topic and the macro frame as well as the units. The topic here is Foja site gata wa. Macro frame is kase o kojo saseru koto ga dekiru. Kachion site ga natorium de aru is the micro frame. And if we look at the remaining part, there were 4 units. Kono yona, kono mama de wa, shokubai kase ga hikui no de, ion no koukan suru koto ni yotte. Now, all these 4, if you see carefully, of this kind as it is, these are universal. So this goes into your database. Then there are catalytic activities low, therefore. So is low, therefore can go into the database through exchanging of ions. Koto ni yotte, suru koto ni yotte. So it is true. This can go into the database. And when we line up all these equivalents, it comes as regards Foja site type. Of this kind, cation site is sodium as it is, catalytic activity is low. Therefore, through exchanging of ions, activity can be improved. As regards Foja site type, of this kind, cation site is sodium as it is, catalytic activity is low. Therefore, through exchanging of ions, activity can be improved. What WH does, suppose I read it once again, cation site is sodium as it is. This is what it means is reading as it is with the previous clause or previous segment, or read it cation site is sodium as it is, catalytic activity is low. Now, where to apply this? It is the 5W1H which helps much better. And these 4 units have helped us in understanding the content easily. So it has improved the ease of doing. And if we try to put back the elements that were taken back or taken aside, the flow would be as regards Foja site type of this kind. Cation site is sodium alkali metal as it is, catalytic activity is low. Therefore, through exchanging of ions, activity can be improved. This obviously needs fine tuning, and 5W1H is kept in mind while doing this transpositioning as well as the fine tuning. Foja site type of this kind, wherein cation site is sodium alkali metal, has low, begin again, say Foja site type of this kind has low catalytic activity as it is, you are getting. So it's a topic getting connected to all the segments separately, and we are saying wherein cation site is sodium alkali metal, has a low catalytic activity as it is, and therefore the activity can be improved through exchange of ions. Wherein has been added. I think you are now familiar with the use of wherein. Segmenting or segregating the topic in the beginning has served a great purpose because it's getting applied all through in the sentence. Macro and micro frames have undergone inter as well as intra transpositioning, and the target language has to be kept in mind while doing this. Ease of doing has also improved, readability has also improved. Going back, or trying to flash back on what we have done, all the concepts and techniques in a nutshell, if we try to say how to put them in use, then let's see it from other point of view, in a different angle or in a different way. When you look at a particular sentence or a particular document, cognition, this is where one finds that the translation is difficult or is easy, it's chocolate for me, and sometimes you say it's Greek for me, I can't even read, it doesn't make any sense. So let's see what happens when we look at a particular document or at a particular sentence. There are 3 type of categories which can be based upon the feeling or based upon your first response. The document or the sentence can be divided into 3 categories. Let's begin with the fully known, the rightmost. You think you look at a particular document and you say, oh, it's fully known to me. What it means is that you have read some article in the newspaper this morning It may be a satellite launch, or it may be some accident, or it may be some political news, or maybe economic activity, easing the pressure on the CRR, etc. You have already seen that article. Now you see another article which you have to translate, and you suddenly find, oh, the content is quite similar, and I know this also, and you find that it's fully known. In such case, frankly speaking, you don't need any technique to attempt. If you are a translator and if you are familiar, you are finding that the degree of familiarity is very high, you can straight away go and do translation. But if you apply some methodology, for example, pick out the units first, whatever units you have the equivalents available in your mind straight away, pick them out so that you have more ease of doing in your mind, you are feeling more ease of doing. Then look at the frame and see if frame transfer is required, and then if need be apply 5W1H, because this is required only to ascertain whether you are doing the translation correctly or not. Now, being able to comprehend actually means that the 5W1H is not required. So this is why I said in the beginning that if required only you can use it. If there is some confusion somewhere, if there is something which you feel that you need to ascertain, then apply it. Otherwise, you don't need to apply this. This way of handling even the known documents or the known subject or the known sentences, this process makes the job easier. Now let's go to the leftmost, that is the totally unknown. Now totally unknown means you look at the document, you find that the kanjis are difficult, the sentence is longer, the macro frame you are not able to easily connect which verb is going with what, and there are too many adjectival clauses or too many units or too many segments you can say in the sentence, and the subject is totally unknown to you. In such a case, calm down and straight away apply the frame capture and frame transfer technique. Accuracy will be ensured if you accurately capture the frame and accurately transfer the frame into the target language. This can be achieved, or this can be done even without having the subject knowledge. Ease of doing is relatively high. I am saying that if you do not apply this technique, you will actually find it almost impossible to translate, and many a times you might have seen around you, or maybe experienced yourself also, that you write down something and then later on find that, oh, it doesn't make any sense. Or maybe after you have seen some accurate translation or maybe an abstract of that particular document, then you find your translation was almost senseless. So as compared to that particular situation, the ease of doing is relatively high in this particular case. So frame transfer or frame through frame capture and then frame transfer is a technique which can be applied on sentences which are totally unknown. In other words, I can say if you are a beginner in the translation, then it is safer to apply the frame transfer, frame capture and frame transfer technique. Now let's talk about some sentence where you find that something is difficult but something you know. This is what usually happens, that because you are already translating, you have already done some work in translation. So it's not that everything is unknown to you. Now to the unknown things only you have to address it properly. So in such cases, the best way is to identify the macro frames, the micro frames, and segregate the units within the frames, this process. Then try to use 5W1H. This will help you in ascertaining or in doing the transpositioning. And finally, identifying units, it improves the speed, which I would like to mention here. Otherwise, you can even leave out the identification of the units. Now, this is what is summed up here, but what we did a while ago, if we recall, it was the keeping in mind the 5W1H technique and then picking up the frame, then applying once again the 5W1H technique is actually a better technique. So we have done some combinations. I would like you also to try various combinations, and you'll probably find that all the techniques should be there in your mind. All the techniques means there are basically two techniques we are talking here, 5W1H and the frame capture. Look at the sentence and see whether the frame is, you can comprehend the frame or not. If you can, then no problem, but if you cannot, then apply the 5W1H there itself. And while doing so, if you find that there is a particular set of words or a group of words which is a unit, which forms a unit, Now, why leave it out? You mark it out immediately because you know that there's an equivalent available for that unit, and you know that equivalent also. So this means in one sentence, 20%, 30%, sometimes 40-50% of the content can be taken out from your own database, which is probably in your mind or probably available with you at some place. So this, if it is, for example, 10-page documents, this means 4 pages out of that are already available as translated component with you. This is what the unit can do for you. And now, summing up the learning, frame capture and transfer technique is easier to employ, whereas 5W1H gives a better readability along with accuracy, but the process is tedious. I would say tedious for the beginners and sometimes tedious when the context is not known to you at all. Then combination of the two techniques helps in improving the readability, and it improves the ease of doing also to a certain extent. Dividing into smaller segments, I've written here, can be helpful, but I would say is definitely helpful, and it gives you freedom. You can play with the divided components or the divided segments. It's, as I mentioned many times, it's driving 5,000 kilometers or 500 kilometers. Can this figure of 500 or 5,000 kilometers can give you a phobia? But if you drive 50 kilometers or 20 kilometers and have a break and forget that you have driven for 20 or 50 kilometers, you will never feel tired, and 500 kilometers can be done without much difficulty. Similarly, breaking the sentence into simpler, smaller segments is the concept here. Inter and intra-transpositioning is applicable on macro as well as micro frames, and 5W1H helps in doing so. References, a number of references have been used here. This is for you to see. And thank you so much for being with me in module 15, and see you in module 16. Thank you very much.